Probably you may find it really hard to believe what I'm going to talk about, so I want you to enjoy this story as a work of fiction. I must admit that I'm a rather eccentric individual whom you may not fully understand. In truth, I have harbored a deep curiosity for quite some time about ascending my consciousness from this world to a higher dimensional realm through the practice of channeling. I've had a vague notion that I might be able to establish contact with intelligent beings that are not of this earth or exist in dimensions beyond our own. It all began when I stumbled upon an article discussing Bashar, a renowned higher dimensional entity who communicates through Darryl Anka, a skilled practitioner of channeling. Driven by my quest, I diligently sought out scattered information about channeling from various sources on the internet. I made repeated attempts at channeling, experimenting and learning from trial and error. I had a glimmer of hope that I might succeed in connecting with beings from realms beyond our world and Earth itself. However, I must confess that I initially harbored some skepticism towards Bashar and the concept of channeling. Nonetheless, I reasoned that there would be no harm in pursuing this endeavor even if it were to fail in my attempts. Thus, I made the decision to embrace the challenge and strive to master the art of channeling. I firstly referred to astral projection prior to practicing channeling. It was really tough to get used to it, especially at the beginning. After practicing channeling for several months, I once again attempted to channel during deep meditation while lying in bed before sleep. As usual, I reached that moment when I was on the verge of falling asleep and suddenly felt a sensation of my body, particularly from my hips to my chest, floating in the air. At that moment, I realized that I had finally succeeded in astral projection. However, it felt strangely different from the commonly recognized concept of astral projection because I didn't experience the sensation of my soul leaving my body. Instead, I distinctly felt my body floating in the air. As I grappled with confusion about what was happening to my body, the scenery in my room began to gradually change. Describing what I witnessed in that moment is quite challenging. It felt as if I was observing rapidly changing scenery from the window of a speeding train. This description probably best captures the scene I experienced during astral projection and makes it easier for you to understand. I thought it was just a vivid lucid dream, but gradually the walls of my room suddenly vanished, and I found myself in a space where various paints were mixed together in a chaotic and incomprehensible way, creating a jumble of colors. Unspeakable fear started to arise within me. "No way! Set me back!" I yelled and cried out loudly in the space. At the same time, I felt my body being pulled by something. However, I was disoriented and unsure of where I was being pulled to. I was so scared that I felt like I was about to pee gallons. I thrashed my arms and legs as I was being pulled. I tried to distract myself from the fear by singing my favorite song. I was being forcefully pulled backwards against my will. And then I suddenly found myself in a wide space filled with gentle light. Before I knew it, the pulling sensation and floating feeling disappeared. I realized that I was standing on my own 2 feet. I noticed that there were bubbles floating in front of me.
"Don't touch it!"
Someone stopped me in Japanese. Surprised, I turned around and saw a man approaching me with a look of anger. The man was a middle-aged white man resembling Michael Moore, wearing shorts, an aloha shirt, and beach sandals. I felt so relieved that I could finally talk to someone who might understand me. "Oh God!" I squatted down on the spot and cried out loudly. Moore sat next to me and asked,
"How did you come to this place?"
I answered, "When I practiced astral projection just for fun, I was pulled to this place, and everything has gone crazy." I explained my detailed circumstances and the reasons why I attempted astral projection. He suddenly looked panicked and scolded me.
"What do you think you're doing? Do you really think this is a dream? Never do this again."
I said, "I understand that this feels like a lucid dream, but I have no idea how to wake myself up from it." In response, Moore angrily replied,
"I told you this is not a dream."
Gradually calming down, I started to think that if it's a dream, I should entertain myself. So jokingly, I asked him to do something that would prove this is not a dream. He answered me with concern.
It is really difficult to prove whether this space aligns with your concept of a lucid dream.
I insisted that he tell me if there was another method to prove that this was not a dream. He replied,
In that case, I will take you closer to Earth.
And he grabbed my arms and trying to take me somewhere. I was pulled by him through the space where various paints were mixed together in a chaotic manner. As I walked, feeling quite sick, I kept my eyes closed. Suddenly, I heard his voice saying,
We arrived.
Curiosity got the better of me, so I opened my eyes only to find myself still surrounded by a chaotic mix of jumble of colors. He pointed his finger towards something, and I strained my eyes to see what it was. There, in front of me, was a globe about the size of a volleyball. I remarked, That's a globe model. He then instructed me,
Think about your house, your room. Visualize it in your mind right now. We're gonna go there.
Following his guidance, I imagined my house and room as vividly as possible. Strangely, the globe began to grow larger and larger. Feeling a sense of unease, I attempted to escape, but he firmly grasped my arms, preventing me from leaving. Meanwhile, the space around us started to be engulfed by the expanding globe. When I became aware, I found myself in my own room. Looking up at the sky through the window, I could see the chaotic painted space lingering there. Moore asked,
Have you recently lost something?
I had indeed lost my headphones somewhere, so I informed him about it. He instructed me to strongly imagine them in my mind. At that moment, I felt a strong pull on my body, and before I knew it, I was in my friend's room. In the room, there was only Moore and me. Suddenly, I noticed something shiny under the TV stand. He said to me,
From now on, I will live in your room. After you return home, you're gonna get your headphones back from your friend's house, alright? This is warning, but do not ascend yourself to that space. Do you understand? If possible, forget all about this experience. I know it's difficult, but try not to remember, okay?
Before we parted ways, I asked him one last question. What kind of being are you? He replied with a wry smile and a sigh.
You and I exist in different dimensional spaces. If I were to use words from your world to describe my existence, I could be referred to as an alien.
Suddenly, I felt a sensation of weightlessness from my buttocks to my chest. And just like that, I regained consciousness in my room. On a later occasion, my headphones were mysteriously discovered under the TV stand in my friend's house. This strange occurrence only served to deepen my curiosity with colorful space I had wandered into. Despite Moore's warnings, I found myself longing to return to that place. So every night, I attempted to channel and ascend myself to that space. About a week later, when I became aware, I found myself floating in a chaotic, colorful space. Unlike the previous time, I didn't feel any pulling sensation, and there was no sense of fear. Instead, I freely roamed this space, guided by my own will. As I glanced back, I noticed a volleyball-sized globe. Although I didn't know why, I had an intuitive sense that it presented Earth. Likewise, there were globes the size of volleyballs near Earth, which I presumed to be Venus and Saturn. Furthermore, there were scattered volleyball-sized globes all around, but their relative positions didn't seem to correspond to the actual planetary layout. While I was happily exploring this fascinating environment, I came across three middle-aged men engaged in conversation surrounding a particular planet. To my surprise, each and every one of them resembles Michael Moore. I greeted them with a simple hello, and they turned to me looking utterly astonished.
You seriously?
They spoke to me with concern. I said, "Does my presence here bother you?" They replied,
It's not that, but we don't gain anything from each other.
Nevertheless, I proceeded to ask them the prepared questions. Just like before, I asked them who they were, and what kind of beings they were. In response, they asked me,
"Who are you?"
I answered, "I'm an Earthian." However, they didn't seem convinced, so I directed their attention to a globe that appeared to represent Earth. Then they asked,
"You're not Aquaho."
I asked them, "What is Aquaho?" They pointed their fingers at a globe representing Mars and said,
"They used to live on this planet."
Feeling astonished that there were life forms on Mars, I tried to inquire about their existence. They replied,
There are differences in the physical laws, the concept of time flow, and the sense of distance between you and us. But all of us, including you, are aliens belonging to a certain planet in a broader sense.
I pointed my finger at the planet they had been discussing earlier and asked, "What is the planet over there?" They informed me,
Unfortunately, that planet is one your planet has not yet discovered.
"Why are we able to understand each other?"
We are able to comprehend communication with beings here in a way that is familiar to us in this space. This law applies to our appearance as well. The reason you saw the figure in front of you at the one you're seeing is that your brain finds it familiar.
"What is this space?"
This is a space that transcends the normal physical laws such as time and distance. It can be likened to a warp device if I were to use a term from your word to help you understand.
Is it difficult for Earthians to find your planet?
Before answering your question, I want to confirm something. How do Earthians observe planets?
They use astronomical telescopes, which are large dome-shaped telescopes placed on a mountain where celestial bodies can be observed.
I see, I understand. One thing I can say for certain is that as long as you rely on physical methods like zooming in on observation targets with telescopes to observe planets, the day will never come when Earthians discover our planet. Why have Earthians ended up using physical methods for astronomical observations, even though they originally used more spiritual means?
I have no idea. Next, I asked them about Mars. By the way, three middle-aged men who were discussing amongst themselves around a planet the size of volleyball all resembled Michael Moore. For convenience in understanding, let's designate the three Michael Moores as A, B, and C. Michael Moore, C, wearing a kimono, said,
"It is not a good idea to talk about this subject."
Michael Moore, B, in a suit, answered me,
Actually, the dimensional level and physical laws on Mars are the same as those on Earth. There used to be a wide variety of life forms, including intelligent beings. At that time, the only planets in the solar system where life existed apart from Mars were the Sun and the Earth.
According to them, there's still living being in the Sun. They took me to a green globe about the size of volleyball and told me that it was the Sun. Initially, I didn't think it was the Sun, but I could see the Earth revolving around this globe. "It's not burning," I remarked.
The burning occurs only on the surface. The Sun is the extraordinary star where multiple dimensions and the physical laws intersect.
They replied. As I was observing the Sun, I noticed someone walking towards me from inside the green globe that we recognized as the Sun. A young man approached me and casually greeted me saying,
"What's up?"
Three more explained that the beings living on the Sun could also ascend to this space, but I didn't understand at all. The Sandman remarked,
"So, you're from Earth. You're quite uncommon here. Haha. You're definitely not one of Aquaho."
I inquired, "Who are the Aquaho?" The Sandman responded,
"They are intelligent beings residing on Mars."
He continued,
During the period when there was a civilization on Mars, there were also life forms on Earth, although they were as small as bacteria.
In response, I shared with them our Earthian belief in the theory of evolution, which posits that all creatures have originated from minuscule organisms resembling bacteria. Their response was an uproarious laughter. When the Earth entered the Cambrian period, a wide variety of life forms emerged. According to the Sandman, this period witnessed the most intense intervention by Aquaho. He advised me to refrain from assuming that the concept of evolution only applies to organisms originating from the Earth. At the moment, Moore interrupted and told the sad man,
You should also stop existing within multiple dimensions that converge in the sun.
It appeared the Aquaho are the ones most closely resembling mammals among all the life forms on the Earth. In fact, Aquaho created life forms that we now perceive as lizards and mammals. They attempted to replicate the same process of life form evolution on Mars. I found it mysterious that there was no moon in the area where planets the size of volleyballs were floating. I was expecting to see moon, as it is typically present in the solar system. Then Moore B approached me and said,
There's no such foreign object you refer to as the moon, reflected in the simulated planet system.
I asked him to clarify his statement. According to him, the term moon as we understand it refers to an artificial object in earthly terms. Sometime later, a faction of Aquahos initiated wars on Mars while the remaining members evacuated temporarily to the Earth to escape the conflict. At that time, the atmosphere, viruses, and life forms on the Earth evolved uniquely, making the Earth an inhospitable place for them to inhabit. The Aquahos remaining on Mars began utilizing nuclear weapons, leveraging the sun's nature of burning through nuclear fusion of hydrogen. However, they lost control, and these nuclear weapons continued to ravage the surface of Mars. As a result, Mars nearly became an uninhabitable planet where it was challenging for other life forms to survive. Both factions of Aquahos engaged in a battle with each other ultimately reached a temporary ceasefire agreement to explore ways to restore Mars and to make it conducive for life once again. During this period, the Aquahos that had evacuated to the Earth encountered life forms that bore a resemblance to themselves and were undergoing a similar evolutionary process. They started analyzing the DNA of various creatures including aquatic life, dinosaurs, lizard species, ancestral primates, and mouse-like animals. Aquahos decided to create a hybrid creature by combining the DNA of various earthly creatures with their own DNA. They released these hybrid creatures onto Earth and observed their growth and evolution. Their hope was that these creatures, having Aquahos DNA, would develop a connection or affinity towards Mars. Aquahos intended to utilize these creatures as labor in their plan to terraform Earth and transform it into a second home planet. In later times, primitive humans emerged on Earth comprising approximately 4 distinct types or species. The first type consisted of humanoid beings with lizard-like facial features standing at heights ranging from 2 to 3 meters. This particular type of human bore the closest resemblance to the Aquahos. Among the bipedal humans with strong ancestral primate characteristics, there were 2 types. These types closely resembled the primitive humans often displayed in the museums. The final type resembled bipedal monkeys, evoking the image of Lucy, one of the earliest documented examples of ape-like human ancestors on Earth. All 4 of these types of primitive humans were creations of the Aquahos, who inhabited the Earth. The first type of humanoid beings with lizard-like facial features were initially protected by Aquahos and taken back to Mars to assist in the restoration of the planet. However, during their journey back to Mars, they had a sudden change of heart, and for some unknown reason, diverted to another planet without stopping by Mars. The humanoid beings resembling bipedal monkeys did not undergo any intellectual evolution after that, and thrived on Earth as monkeys. While they were closely related to chimpanzees, they were a distinct species, and eventually became extinct. Curious, I asked Moore A. Could it be that bipedal monkeys are our ancestors? Moore chuckled before responding.
If you were told that what you just mentioned is true, it's understandable. However, have you ever considered the theory of human evolution originating from bipedal monkeys as an unreasonable concept?
I responded. I believed that human beings shared similarity with monkeys, which is why I supported the theory of evolution on the Earth. Moore A replied.
From my perspective, both monkeys and human beings can be viewed as subspecies of this Aquaho. Eventually, Aquaho left behind the remaining humanoid beings that displayed strong characteristics of monkeys.
Over time, this particular type of human beings evolved to a point where they gained intelligence and eventually established civilization on the Earth. During this period, the Aquajos remained in their spaceship above the Earth. However, once they realized that human beings had established civilization, they descended to the Earth. In around 8000 BC, Aquajos began to settle on the surface of the Earth. Their main base was located in the present-day the Middle East Asian region. There were actually two distinct types of humanoid beings that had evolved from the monkey-like creatures. These two types had undergone unique evolutionary paths, but they didn't have a friendly relationship with each other. Over time, tensions escalated, and they eventually started engaging in a war that initially began as small skirmishes. Aquajos were perplexed about how they could control these two types of human beings. By the way, during that time, the Aquajos mothership, which they used to descend to the Earth, remained grounded on the Earth's surface. It was so massive that human beings mistook it for a mountain or something similar. Around 7000 BC, the war between the two types of human beings continued unabated, and finally the Aquajos decided to intervene in the conflict. Their original intention was to encourage reconciliation among human beings and prompt them to return to Mars immediately to participate in the restoration effort. However, gradually while mediating the human war, the Aquajos themselves began to take sides and support one faction over the other. With the backing of the Aquajos, the intensity of the war between the two types of human beings increased. This is the story of 6000 BC. During that time, the intelligence of the humanoid beings had enveloped to a level where they could create maps and understand chemical reactions. I was feeling extremely bewildered after being presented with these unexpected revelations by multiple Moor and the Sandman. At that moment, Moor A instructed me,
"It's time for you to return to your room and get some sleep."
The Sandman advised me.
"I wouldn't recommend you to come to this place again."
Curious, I asked him, "Am I the first Earthian to visit this place?" The Sandman replied,
"No, I've often witnessed other Earthians coming to this place."
Following that, Moore guided me back to my room, and I lay down on my bed and quickly falling asleep. Actually, a couple days later, I returned to this chaotic painted space again, and I learned more about the ancient history of the Earth from Moore, which we never know without hesitation. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the war that took place on the Earth between the Aquajos and humans in ancient times. After Aquajos intervened in the conflict, they introduced highly advanced weaponry that far exceeded the technological capabilities of the time, resulting in the escalation of the war into large-scale global conflict. The provision of these extraordinary weapons by Aquajos led to the forced mobilization of a faction consisting of both human beings and Aquajos who had previously remained neutral in the war. During this period, a hostile relationship existed between a faction of Aquajos based in Israel, Iraq, and India, and another faction based in Africa. Over time, the balance of power on the battlefield gradually shifted in the favor of the forces based in Israel, Iraq, and India, thanks to their mothership being stationed in that region, enabling them to innovate and develop new weapon technologies more easily. Eventually, the forces in the Middle East resorted to use of nuclear weapons, which were created with the assistance of Aquajos' advanced technology. Armed with these nuclear weapons provided by Aquajos, human forces began using them without restraint. In response, the forces based in Africa attempted to employ disaster warfare technologies but soon lost control. Aquajos, who had primarily focused on supplying arms and providing warfare technologies, actively joined the war alongside of the human forces. As a result of the uncontrolled use of nuclear weapons and disaster warfare technologies, the forces based in Africa found themselves on the verge of annihilation. Meanwhile, the forces in the Middle East developed disaster warfare technology through the fusion of hydrogen, drawing inspiration from the sun's power. This enabled them to create an unlimited number of nuclear weapons. They unleashed these weapons against the forces in Africa, almost wiping them out. The surviving Aquajos based in the Middle East, the sole remaining extraterrestrial presence on the Earth, commenced a relentless pursuit of the surviving human beings affiliated with the forces in Africa, with the intent to eliminate them all. During this time, the surviving Aquajos based in Africa activated a covert flat weapon without hesitation, choosing self-destruction. This is the story in 5000 BC. Finally, the Aquajos in the Middle East became aware of the existence of this weapon. The earth was devastated by a catastrophic flood caused by the use of Aquajos' flat weapon. Almost all continents sank into the sea, drastically reducing the habitable areas for both humans and terrestrial organisms. In order to escape the flood, Aquajos temporarily left the surface and sought refuge in the sky aboard their mothership. During their ascent, they permitted the surviving human beings to board their mothership. When I asked about the myth of Noah's Ark, Moore smiled and said,
Indeed, they allowed some earthly creatures to board their ship, but flooding itself is not uncommon on Earth. There have been numerous flood disasters in the past even before the war began, given that this planet is predominantly covered by water.
A faction of Aquajos that had left from the Earth, along with the humanoid beings with the lizard-like facial features brought from the Earth, made the decision to intervene in the uncontrollable war situation. Utilizing their advanced technology from Mars, they somehow managed to deactivate and collect the flat weapon that had caused a massive disaster on the Earth. These Aquajos returned to the Earth and actively intervened in the ongoing war, using their Mars super technology to deactivate the flat weapon. They imposed a prohibition on Aquajos on the Earth, forbidding them from returning to Mars until they fully fulfilled responsibility for the complete restoration of the devastated Earth. The Aquajos from Mars left their counterparts on their Earth and returned to Mars. From that point onward, the Aquajos remained in the mothership above the Earth until approximately 4000 BC. They made sincere effort to educate the human beings they brought from the ground, but it proved to be a challenging task due to humans' relatively short lifespan. As Aquajos observed human beings across generations in the mothership while providing education, they noticed that humans, despite their individual short life cycle, steadily continued the existence of their species and passed down knowledge from one generation to the next. Recognizing the potential for human beings to independently develop civilization if given the opportunity to descend the ground and be educated in advanced technologies, Aquajos made the decision to bring human beings down from the mothership. However, some humans and their descendants chose not to board the ship and remained on the devastated Earth, enduring the harsh conditions caused by the Aquajos flat weapon. These survivors attempted to restore the advanced technology of the disaster weapon, but they faced significant challenges due to its complexity and high level of advancement. Instead, they focused on cultivating their skills in fields such as farming and architecture, which they had learned from Aquajos. The remarkable intelligence displayed by human beings was attributed to the presence of Aquajos' DNA incorporated into their own genetic makeup. In 4000 BC, Aquajos returned human beings to the surface, but provided them with knowledge instead of tools. This decision was made to avoid the risk of repeating the same mistake that had led to a devastating war on the Earth. The descendants of the Sumerian people, who were likely the ones to descend from the mothership, passed on the necessary technologies and knowledge to foster innovation and develop civilization among the survivors in the post-flood world. As a result, the Mesopotamian civilization thrived with the support of the Sumerian people. However, some of the survivors held a deep grudge against Aquajos. Their descendants, who learned about the cruelty and devastation caused by Aquajos through folklore and stories, harbored strong vengeance against them. These descendants evolved into the Akkadians, holding a profound grudge against the Sumerian people who had close ties with Aquajos. Eventually, the Akkadians conquered the Sumerian civilization. Even after that, Aquajos continued to visit Earth regularly and shared knowledge and technologies with people as needed. They would identify particularly advanced human beings and bring them aboard their ship. Aquajos maintained regular contact with the Earth, and they expressed a particular interest in the Maya civilization. The Maya people were known for the pride and the independence. They chose to develop their own technologies instead of relying on those propagated by the Sumerian people, such as farming, metalworking, and architecture. Their intelligence and ingenuity allowed them to achieve remarkable advancements on their own. Aquajos recognized the exceptional level of technology that the Maya people had uniquely developed, and speculated that their DNA might have influenced their innate capabilities. Aquajos provided education in astronomy and mathematics to the Maya people, who made significant discoveries including the concept of zero and precise calculation of celestial movements. Impressed by the Maya people's accomplishment, Aquajos developed a fondness for them and shared exclusive methods of celestial observation that remain unknown to humanity today. Aquajos chose certain Maya individuals who had a desire for space travel and aided them in becoming the second wave of Sumerian people. However, as a consequence, the Maya civilization, with diminished number of intelligent individuals, encountered a series of hardships, including famine, economic collapse, and entanglement in invasive wars. These challenges ultimately led to the decline and downfall of the Maya civilization. After that, as space exploration became their primary focus, Aquajos gradually reduced their interaction with the Earth. Their curiosity shifted from the Earth to the vast expanse of the space, and they direct their attention towards the development of space technologies with humanoid beings who possess lizard-like features. Moore also mentioned about the pyramids placed in Egypt. According to Moore, the presence of the pyramids in Egypt was a source of astonishment and raised a caution among observers. By 2500 BC, several pyramids had already been finished. Moore suggested that the construction method employed in erecting these structures could have been influenced by extraterrestrial entities, as opposed to being solely the result of Aquajos or human efforts. The humans involved in the construction were reincarnations of beings from another planet, distinct from Aquajos, who had come to the Earth with the intention of settling here. Due to some unknown circumstances, they were left stranded on the Earth and carried the memories of their desire to return to their home planet, even in their subsequent lifetimes. The pyramids were built as a means to indicate their presence on the Earth, with the hope that their existence would serve as a beacon for their rescuers to come and save them. Therefore, they manipulated the ruling powers of that time and presented the benefits of constructing the pyramids, attaining great fame and inspiring awe and respect from the people, and securing a lasting regency as revered figures to be remembered by future generations. Through these persuasive efforts, they obtained permission to proceed with the construction of the pyramids. The pyramids themselves were created as a symbol of the Earth. Particularly the Great Pyramids of Giza was constructed using technology that are beyond the reach of modern humans. In the process of symbolizing the presence, intricate techniques were employed throughout the pyramid to embed messages that would serve as a proof of their existence. For example, the weight ratio between Khufu's Great Pyramid in Giza at the time of construction and the Earth is the same. The volume ratio between Khufu's pyramids and the Khufu pyramids correspond to the volume ratio between Venus and the Earth. Multiplying the height of Khufu's pyramid at the time of construction by 10 to the power of 10 results in a value that matches the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Multiplying the total weight of Khufu's pyramid at the time of construction by 10 to the power of 18 results in a value that matches the total weight of the Earth. Multiplying the volume of Khufu's pyramid at the time of construction by 10 to the power of 14 results in a value that matches the volume of a true sphere with the Earth's equator at that radius. The temperature inside of the chambers of Khufu's pyramid at the time of construction was designed to match the average temperature of the Earth at that time. Another important point to add is that the pyramids were not constructed by stacking stones from the bottom up, but rather they were built from the top down. While primitive sledges were used at times to transport the stone blocks, the construction primarily involved levitating the stones and assembling them in a downward direction. I decided to ask Moore wearing aloha all the questions I prepared. The question was about the Nazca lines. According to Moore, these were created by direct descendants of the Sumerians to teach drawing and the concept of similarity. It was a lost technique, but they used sophisticated algorithm, mathematics, and geography to enlarge the original drawings recorded on a clay tablet onto the ground. They then handcrafted highly precise balloons to show the Nazca lines from the sky and demonstrate the concept of similarity. After this question, I left the Celtic painted space and woke up in my bed. Since then, this space has fell off. Whether it was a reflection of my own dream or not is uncertain, and there is no way to prove Moore's claims about ancient history. However, intuitively, I feel that there are plenty of things that cannot be explained through the material evaluation methods of science. Moore concluded with the following statements.
Over a long period of time, humans have lost many of their inherent abilities and instead focus on material innovations. By insisting on material proof, we deny the existence of things that cannot be proven materially and narrow down the possibilities. Without understanding that, Earthians are far from grasping the workings of the universe. Humans were originally created as stepping stones for the revival of Mars, but it will be impossible for humans to reach the realm of Aquaho, which gave birth to humans and continues to evolve civilization even in the next few thousands of years. However, Earthians' evolution is steadily progressing.